Hey guys, I'm just done with presenting this knife, and I'm glad I got to it first, as otherwise I would have also tested this one, and without gloves my hands can't take it. It's one of those days. Now, I forgot to mention something. Working with this knife with gloves, depending on the gloves you use, and if you consider this a work knife, in my experience, people who actually need knives for their job, they don't look at things like YouTubers do, or like people who are passionate about knives do. And they tend to work with knives and just say I like it or I don't like it. Now you can open this one with gloves and you can close it, but it's gonna be a bit more difficult depending on the gloves you wear. I can't do what I normally do very well here because the gloves get in the way. But holding this with gloves in hand, you can even get over the flipper tab part, and yeah, it becomes a bit more comfortable. Now, if you have huge hands, you're not gonna get a good grip with gloves on this knife, and that's something that's true for all knives. Now, the second knife, which my patrons wanted to see, was this one, and that is the Cold Steel Air Lite. If you've been watching my channel, you already have the answer to, do I like cold steel knives? I do. I would like to say I recently discovered them within the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. And this knife I was looking at it, seemed interesting, but a friend of mine bought this knife and he kept raving on about it. And I said, I have to try it, and yeah. So I got the knife, and from the start I said, wow, because I never held one in hand. I think Andrew Demko talked about this knife, and he said the idea came to him from having cold steel broken skull. And I can see where that came from, but I think this one's well, a bit more normal than the broken skull, and this is a hell of a small tank. Now, my initial thought was this going to be uncomfortable? And I've seen some people grind this part off, and they look great. But honestly, this little part is not uncomfortable at all. Would I like it to have a full scale here? Yeah, but I wouldn't go as far as to modify this and grind this down. I think it's perfect the way it is. No metal liners, as we are used from cold steel, and this one has the AUS10A steel. This was not my first experience with cold steel AUS10A, but it was a bigger knife, and I didn't do the same things I would do with this one. Now, like the Civivi Elementum, I used this when I renovated my apartment. This was one of the knives that I actually used, and I used it to do just the most awful things. I found some old steel wiring which was in the wall, and I cut that. I cut drywall, which is not inherently that bad as that steel wire, and that steel wire did a number on the blade. I mean, I have already sharpened the knife at that point, and I cut that steel wire, and it wasn't this new wire which is very flimsy and it's just what's enough. It was old steel wires from probably the 1980s, 1970s, older than me. And it did a number on the blade, but it did get through. And that was just a moment where I said, can I do it? I had my Leatherman in my pocket, so I could have cut that wire with my Leatherman. It would have been no problem. But I chose to use this knife, and it was, I mean, the wire was up in the wall, and I had to stretch over my head, and then I saw, oh my goodness, what did I do to the edge? And I said, no point stopping here, and I got through that wire. Of course, it dulled the blade. The blade was, well, if you ever cut steel wire with a pocket knife, like in a slicing motion, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's gonna do a number on the blade. Fixing it was, well, sharpening it. AUS10A, in my experience so far, is not the easiest steel to sharpen. It seemed to me that it was more abrasion resistant than others. I would say, like I said, in my own experience so far, VG10 was easier to sharpen than AUS10A. How does it do for edge retention? Great. How did I test that? I just, after I took out the chips and after everything, I kept working with the knife and I kept it sharp by stropping it. Now, I've twisted the knife around and maybe you can see it. This knife does not have a symmetrical grind. That is one thing that bugs the hell out of me. I like knives to have a symmetrical grind. So basically, if you sharpen it with the same edge angle on both sides, you're gonna have the same width of the cutting edge. And this one doesn't. Is that a problem? Well, not really, no. But it's just something like some people want to have their blades centered. Me, I like to have a symmetrical grind. This knife has about a 20-degree per side edge angle. That is a big edge angle. Like I've just shown in my previous video, what the Endura did to this piece of wood, that's kind of what this knife does. It's hard to take a nice controlled wood slivers with this knife. Now, if it's very sharp, you can do it. And this will probably be a bit easier because like this, I can get a nicer bite. But still, it's not going to be as easy as with the CVV Elementum. But because it has a larger handle and, well, you can see, it does become a bit easier. In my opinion, and I've said this for many of my cold steel knives, they are tools. They are tools to get a job done. That's why they use the triad lock. This is a lock that won't fail. Now, this one, the tension on it is okay. It's not like my American Lawman where with my right hand, I'm sometimes struggling to depress the locking mechanism. And it's not like the Range Boss, which I've just showed you in a previous video, where it just goes very easily. Now, the action is smooth. No issues there. But it's not a fidgety knife. It's not a toy. One thing that I did do to it was darken the pocket clip a bit. I just don't like shiny pocket clips. Not that I would carry this clip to my pocket. I carry it inside my pocket, but I wanted to have it a bit darker. And you do get the second pocket clip with this one because this one does not go on this side. It's not going to be a good fit. In hand, you feel the pocket clip, but it doesn't bother you because, you see, it's a slim design knife and the pocket clip is not raised up very much. With thin pants, you won't have a problem getting this inside your pocket. With thicker pants, you might. Now let's see how it sits in pocket. That's what you would have. And this is why I say that cold steel, I think, are great working knives. Some of them, their knives have a different task in hand, but something like this, I think this is a great working knife. Once again, no boy dent, I don't use that, but even in the chest lever grip, I don't feel that at some point with a normal grip, I would depress the back lock and have the blade wiggle or accidentally disengage it. With a normal grip, that doesn't happen. For my American Lawman, I can't really do this because it takes way more pressure than this to disengage. But with a normal grip, this does quite well. Now, it does have a nice distal taper. Not the best. So if you're considering this for a very controlled woodworking, long piece of stick, depending on the edge angle you have, sure, you're going to have some control with the tip. Not as good as with the cold steel Range Boss or Broken Skull. Now, the edge on this one is not perfect. And there's a reason for that. I still like to play with this knife. And when it comes to this knife, I don't mind what I hit. And that was because of that steel wiring which I cut. And I seen the damage I did, and yeah, I fixed it up. It wasn't as easy to fix up as HCR13 MOV, or like I said, in my experience, VG10. But I fixed it up, and I didn't put the smoothest of edges on. Now I've stropped it, and you can take my word for it, it shaves. But since I do have my little notepad, I'm going to show you the condition in which this blade currently lives with me. Slices through, but there's a small chip. Yeah, and if you look, you're gonna see where it is. There's a small snag. I don't think my camera will pick it up that well, but there's a small snag, so it did get chipped from stuff. Now, it didn't get chipped from my pocket keys, from my keys inside my pocket, because it's a closed back design, and I like this, especially for working knives. Clip to my pocket, I feel this is very safe, even though the G10 does not have such an aggressive texture that it will rip my pocket. But I never snagged this one on a door or on anything else. So I'm very happy with it. You do get the usual cold steel thumb studs, which you can take off. I think I did take off the thumb stud once when I sharpened the blade. However, taking off cold steel thumb studs can be tricky. You have to have a very good grip, or you're gonna mess up this side of the screw, because they are in there quite well. The jimping, that's a bit aggressive. Being that this one is such a thin profiled knife, it's not the worst jimping, but for my liking, it's a bit aggressive. Could you do something about it? Probably. Now, this knife with gloves, it's a different story. It's like the Broken Skull with gloves, or the Range Boss with gloves. Being that this is a thin profile knife, some gloves really give you a better purchase, and this is what I say, this is a great, and I would call this a hard, heavy use knife. Now, it may not have the blade length that some people require with such hard core jobs. I don't know what that would be, but if you're in construction and you're wearing gloves and have this knife in your hand and you have to, I don't know, cut something really hard, with gloves it feels very safe in hand due to the handle profile. And now with gloves you have extra girth on the knife in your hand. It just feels very, very safe. And yeah, with this is what I said. See, I can take wood shavings, but in this position, they will all curl up, and that's due to the edge angle. Now, with gloves, pushing down on it, yeah, I can put a lot of force in the cut, and I can cut a fairly thick piece of wood, and I think you've seen this is not a soft wood, and it feels comfortable in hand. Now, of course, you're going to feel it because it's not as rounded and as nice as, for example, a Mora 510. A fixed blade for the job. A fixed blade for the job is always a good idea, but are you going to carry a fixed blade, or are you going to prefer a folder which you can clip to your pocket, or sometimes to the outside of your pocket if you keep using that knife? I've seen people do it, and I've always wondered, why would you clip a folder to the outside of your pocket? Well, because sometimes, and I went there, I was just working with very dirty hands, and I didn't want to put the knife in my pocket. Since I was at a cabin working with the knife constantly, it was easier for me to have it outside of my pocket. So clipped like this, and I would just get the knife. Now, maybe that's not the safest thing you want to do, because you can't snag the knife and open it slightly and then cut yourself. But like all backlock design knives, you have to open it quite a lot until it stays open. And this is another reason why I like backlock knives. Well, not backlock knives. I like them. I have nothing against my Endura or my Delica, but I prefer Cold Steel's Triad lock. Do I need the extra safety? No. Is it nice to have? Yes. And I've said this, and I'm probably going to mention it in every cold steel video. Whenever I cut something with a triad lock knife which has the triad lock, I don't feel the back lock move in my hand whenever I put a lot of pressure on the blade. Compare this to the Endura, which is not a triad lock, has the Boyd end. When I cut something, I will feel the blade push on the back lock, push in my hand. With gloves, it's not going to be a huge issue. But this, I don't feel it move. And doesn't bother me. Now, like all folders, you're going to have problems with these ridges. These, mine, I did not work them over with sandpaper. I didn't feel the need so far. For the Cold Steel Range Boss, the GFN handle scales, I did. I put some sandpaper there to round them off. These are sharp, but they don't bother me that much. There's very little space here. They don't have a lot of give. And what some people said that was that knives which don't have steel liners, I'm assuming they were referring to cold steel, have more give to them. They feel more flexible. Now this does not feel flexible. If I squeeze the scales, I can see that they do come closer together, but in working with it, I don't feel this knife move very much. Like I said, a folder, it's got these open, you could improve them by just putting some sandpaper here. Maybe you want to take apart the knife to be extra safe and then just rounding them off a bit. That's going to make a difference, because even now I can feel it. And when I worked, I could also feel it. But like I said, it's not one of those knives that you pick up, you do your 1 or 2 minutes of cutting and you say, ooh, this is not comfortable. An example of that, if you want, is for example the ZT0561, which is a very cool knife. It's one of my grail knives. I still have it. I still like that knife. But you pick it up, you do a couple of cuts in a piece of wood, and it's going to be uncomfortable. This, you're going to feel this like a folder, but it's not going to be that uncomfortable. And I have actually used this as a work knife. In tests, you're going to do the same cutting motion like I just did with the Civivi Elementum, where I just shaved wood and kept cutting, and you're going to feel those hot spots maybe more than you would if you actually work with this knife in construction. And let's be honest, people who work with knives in construction, who need a knife working in construction, they're not going to use that. They have other tools, and they're going to use their pocket knife for the odd job, like they use their multi-tool, because you use heavy duty tools which were designed to do a certain thing. Testing is nice. This is why I'm telling you my opinions. I'm showing you what I can. But you guys who actually use these tools hardcore, and you use a knife for, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours a day, you know what you're looking for. You're looking for a specific handle, you're looking for a specific locking mechanism, something that's going to be comfortable, maybe with gloves, or something where the steel won't rust no matter how damp, wet, or toxic the environment is. You're looking for specific things. You guys know exactly what you want. For the rest of us, it's just nice to think, oh, you know, if I have to work with this knife for 1 hour, I want it to be comfortable. Sometimes that's what I do. Whenever I get a lot of cardboard, I start cutting cardboard. And this is not a knife with which I've cut a lot of cardboard, because the grind is so thick. How thick is it? It's thicker than, for example, the Endura. That's always Delica Endura. The grind is always about 0.6 millimeters behind the edge. That's about, what, 24 thousandths of an inch thick behind the edge. This is 0.8 millimeters behind the edge, so it's rather thick. And with 20 degrees per side, yeah, this is going to be a very resistant edge, but it's not the best slicer. I mean, if I would have to make wood shavings with this, being that this is more comfortable than the Civivi Elementum, was much smaller, I would choose this because it has a smaller edge angle, it has a thinner grind. But if I were to take a knife for what I did, you know, I renovated my apartment and I said, I need to cut this, I need to pry that. I would take this. This is a small tank. And something which I didn't really look into was the weight. And I don't care about weight that much. But a friend of mine, the one who actually got me hooked on this knife, once sent me a picture of his knife weight, and he said it's 89 grams. That's 7 grams heavier than the Benchmade 940, which has a good weight. That's amazing for how stable this knife feels in hand. I like AUS10A. I think they did a good job in my experience so far. For a mid-range budget steel, I can't find a flaw with it. Now, what I do plan to do with this knife is actually reduce the edge angle much more. Maybe thin out the grind and see how it does then. Because this is a very comfortable knife to carry. Much like the Cold Steel Broken Skull and the Range Boss, it's a very thin profiled knife. It's shorter, and like I said, I tend to take this knife with me out here because I like it, this one and the Broken Skull. The Broken Skull is at home, but you see, it's smaller. It'll carry a bit easier for some people, just as thin. It has that extra safety feature that some people may not need, but like, which is the triad lock. Has a good action. So opening this, not an issue. I'm not sure if I can, I do that with the Range Boss, but yeah, I can flick it down and it'll open. This one works way easier. This is just so much fun. But you can do it with this one, so the opening action is pretty good. It doesn't take a lot of effort to close, like the American Lawman. Thin, not very narrow in design, but that's also a good thing for some people. It carries very comfortably. It has I would call this much more hard use than the Broken Skull or the Range Boss, simply because it just has more steel here. And comparing the AUS10A with 4034 SS, I would choose the AUS10A, of course. If I were to compare it to other steels, for a working knife, for a knife that you're gonna just do dirt jobs with, who knows, I think I prefer this over VG10. In my experience so far. Now, I have some experience with VG10. I've used my Endura quite a lot, and I have a Delica, which is a testing knife, very thin, very small edge angle, and I like VG10, but I think I would, for a working knife, like I said, a knife with which you just do the dirtiest of dirty jobs, I like Cold Steel's AUS10A. The price, I think it's acceptable. I don't remember exactly what I paid for it. It was about, I think, 60 euros, 70 euros. But being very passionate about these things, when I got this knife, I said, oh wow, this was a great purchase for my taste. Now, you might find them a bit cheaper, which is great. And the only thing that I don't like about it is the fact that the grind is not symmetrical. But like I said, that's just me. Other than that, really, I can't find a thing. Now, like I said, with gloves, very, very comfortable, feels very safe, and I think Cold Steel just does. They make good tools. Some of their knives are ridiculous. Like I said, I still think the Formax Scout is a ridiculous knife, but it works. And in this case, I think it's fantastic that you can open it and close it using, I have these uncomfortable leather gloves. They're a bit uncomfortable, and I have inner gloves with them, and I can still work this knife very well. Yeah, those are the things which I look at in a knife. And I think I just showed you in the chest lever grip, it does a pretty good job. No issues with me disengaging the lock by accident, and no real discomfort like I have with the Cold Steel Finwolf, which is a woodworking knife in my opinion. And that one, I would have expected it to be a bit more comfortable in the chest lever grip. This one actually is that. And my fingers, my ring finger rests on the lock bar, and I don't feel myself disengaging it at all. Yeah, I like the Triad-Lock, and I like cold steel. I'm planning on getting a few more models. It's a shame that sometimes they use well, lesser steels. I pointed out the advantages that softer steels have, like the Range Boss has a softer steel, but you can keep this sharp simply by using your strop, and sharpening it goes very well with just about any materials. This one I've also kept sharp simply by stropping it, but I have to admit, taking out that huge damage I did in cutting through those metal wires was a bit painful. With this one it would go much easier. So yeah, this was the Cold Steel Air Lite. Once again, it was a suggestion from my patrons. Yeah, I hope you liked the video. If you have any questions or comments about it, if you use this knife and like it, maybe just as much as I do, or maybe even more or less, let me know in the comment section of about what you think about it, what you think could be improved. Personally, I think AUS10A was a great choice for this model as just a simple working knife. And the fact that it has such a thick grind, some people like it, some people benefit from it. I'm probably going to just reduce the edge angle, see then afterwards if I need to do, but I like it as is so far, so I don't know. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to support the channel, check the description box, see what's going on there. And as always, guys, I wish you all a great day.